All right, everyone. Boris Johnson is probably going to replace Theresa May over in the UK. That's good, by the way. And some people thought I was insulting him by saying he seemed like a chucklehead. I'm not. He seems like a funny dude. There's nothing wrong with that. It looks like he's the publicity stunt politician, which is fine. That's probably what the UK needs. Look, if you're not going to be a great power in the world, at least be self-deprecating and give us a lot more British humor about your crazy political system. Because it is an archaic system. It's a system in which UKIP can get 20% of the votes, get no representation at all. It's a system in which people vote for leaving the EU, and then years later you're still in the EU somehow because the can has been kicked down the road by globalists. But Theresa May's leaving. Good riddance. Even people who initially supported her don't like her. Boris Johnson's probably in, and he's saying, yeah, there might be a hard Brexit, and that's okay. Yeah, he's saying, oh, you need to be able to stare these people down. That's what you should have done in the first place. What should have been done is Theresa May never should have been in charge of the negotiations anyway. She was never in favor of Brexit. If you take someone who doesn't like a situation, put him in charge of negotiating it, there's not going to be a good outcome. And that was by design. The globalists put her in there in order to make sure that things dragged on as long as possible, in order to make it as painful as possible, to make it as embarrassing for the UK as possible, to try to get people to demand a second referendum to not leave the EU. When that didn't end up materializing, now they're looking down the barrel of a gun. They're saying one of two things they want to happen. They either want a deal that's shitty, that people will hate, so that they'll, again, eventually, later on, they'll vote to rejoin the EU to get rid of that shitty deal, which is what they'll coax them towards. Or there'll be a hard Brexit, and they, the globalists that run most of the UK's economy, as well as most of the rest of Europe's economies, they will bring the economy crashing down, blame it on Brexit, and say, we need to ameliorate this by rejoining the EU. We need to re-subjugate ourselves to tyranny, otherwise we will be abused. And of course, it's very funny because, what was it, The Intercept or something, it leaked a bunch of diplomatic cables from the US, the ambassador to the US from the UK, talking badly about Trump. That's almost certainly to try to it's a trick. It's a trick by globalists to try to prevent us from striking a lucrative trade deal with the UK in order to safeguard their economy. Which is what it would do. The US is a bigger economy than the European Union. Get a trade deal with us. We'll buy goods. We'll sell you goods. Fuck the European Union. The European Union's behind closed doors, cigar smoking, dark boardroom, actual people running it. They hate the UK right now. They're like, oh my God, causing so many problems and so many headaches. Why won't they just let us fleece them of their money over and over again? That's basically what it boils down to. A bunch of people in Brussels want your money. They want to enslave you. They were already cut up about the UK having certain internal stringencies with regards to the free movement of people in the Schengen area. They're like, well, the UK in fact is an island with a tiny chunk of another island. It's a little bit different from you landlocked continentals. It's a little bit different. It's very interesting. So there will probably be a hard Brexit scheduled for Halloween. It's going to be a very spooky day. It's very, very funny. I hope that there is a hard Brexit. I wish the people of the UK well in rebuilding, your first world status, because you're quickly losing it. Essentially, if a country can be bullied around by all of its neighbors, it's very funny because the European Union supposedly is to prevent problems between European countries, to make things smooth and collectivized and shitty, to make things mediocre, to make it so that everyone can have a living but nobody can really get ahead unless they were already on top to begin with. That's basically it, because the people at the top don't want the competition. So it's a redistributionist scheme to keep people, basically passive and disarmed, and eventually displace them in some cases. And the EU is tyrannical and globalistic and wrong. But it was sold to people on, hey, we can work together, be able to move freely and trade freely, and somehow you can't do that unless you join our federation or our post-national conglomerate of states, which will eventually become just Europe and won't be comprised of individual nations for any real purpose, and already technically aren't. Just go along with it, so to speak. Just fucking do it. It's very interesting, because then the UK says no, has a referendum. It's actually democratic. Like, oh my God, it's the death of democracy that people should vote on such a thing. Well, you left it open in the EU's constitution to allow people to hold such a referendum. And so they've decided to do that, and then people complain about it all day. It's hilarious to me. So Boris Johnson doesn't give a shit. Theresa May's like, oh, at all costs, we must stave off this hard Brexit. She never wanted a Brexit. If she had stayed in there, 10 years from now, you'd still be part of the EU and you'd still be having this conversation. And you'd have more and more people saying, let's just have a second referendum and not leave. Ha ha ha. Yeah, we win after years and years of struggle in holding the referendum in the first place. Let's alienate half of our population and cause riots in the streets. Such a great idea. Let's possibly cause the overthrow of our own government by being suicidally stupid. That's what would happen too, probably. I don't think that the British population would go along with it. Even people who didn't vote in favor of Brexit, I mean, in polling there, it seems like even a large proportion of them don't want a second referendum. Like, just do it. Just leave the EU, later on we can rejoin. And that's what the globalists want. They want them to leave, hard Brexit, collapse the economy, blame the Brexiteers, and then a couple years later, after some pain, hold another referendum. Shall we rejoin the European Union as with fealty, great fealty as subjects of Europe? Oh, yes, yes, please. Take this recession away from us. And of course, it'll be because of those same multinationalists, whose money is mainly in Brussels, not in London. And that's the whole point. And Nigel Farage knows this. He won't say it in those same terms because he'd get called a conspiracy theorist. People would say he was hateful. It's hateful to point out how rich people can sometimes be corrupt. If you're a liberal nowadays, you're not supposed to call out the rich unless they specifically just donate to like the Republican Party or the Tory movement or something. Then it's okay. You can say whatever you want. But if they're normal, globalistic rich people that actually abuse others, they're beyond reproach. Especially if they happen to be of certain ethnicities, and then you're definitely not allowed to talk about them. Interesting how discriminatory the left is these days. Interesting how hateful they become, and violent. I see lots of left-wing violence. I don't see actual mobs of right-wingers throwing rocks at people or playing the knockout game. See that all the time with Antifa, though. They're finally even getting, even CNN called them out. Because they're like, oh, it's getting problematic for us. It's getting difficult for us to defend these groups of communists here. It's very funny. That's about all. Peace out.